Getting proper mental health care can help you feel more like you. That's why Cerebral offers convenient access to online mental health services, including therapy and medication management. Cerebral's diverse clinician team can help with anxiety, insomnia, relationship issues, workplace stress, and more. You can schedule and communicate with your care team through Cerebral's mobile app and attend your sessions from the comfort of your own home. Get started with or without insurance. Plus, you can use your FSA or HSA. Start your first month for 50% off at Cerebral.com/ACAST.
Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of the Cinemile. So last week I went to see The Favourite with my friend Nick. And as I said on the podcast, I knew nothing about the history of this movie to the point where I actually had never even heard of the Queen, which I guess is pretty embarrassing for me. And lo and behold, my dad, who's the resident history buff of the Cinemile, had seen the movie, knew all about the Queen, and had lots to say on the history. So we are on the phone. Dad's in Dublin, I'm in London, and he's back on the podcast. Hi, Dad.
Good evening, Cathy. Nice to be back on the Cinemile.
Thank you for coming back. You're one of our very popular returning guests.
How kind. How kind.
So firstly, tell me what you thought of the movie as a movie, and then tell me all about the history and what they got wrong.
Okay, as a movie, first of all, I'd say, why was it 2 hours? They had a story to tell, but even taking the story they did tell, I found it went on and on and on and on. So they probably had a reason for it to be 2 hours, maybe tied in with schedules on TVs and such like. But I thought for what was in it, it was way too long. I thought the film was very much kind of along the lines of a soap opera, throwing in bits and pieces to keep people looking at it, I suppose. In terms of some of the characters, I thought there was virtually no well-developed characters in it, male or female, particularly male. There wasn't one sound male character in the film, not one. And only a passing reference to to Anne's husband, a man who was to whom she was very close. They seemed to be a very happy couple, even though they had an awful lot of sadness in their lives. So putting it all together, my kind of overall assessment of the film is that it's kind of like something like a sexed-up pantomime.
Did you think it was funny though? Because I thought it was really funny.
I thought there was a few good gags in it, all right.
And so go on. I know you've lots to say on the history, so where do you want to start?
Well, on the history, I thought the way, say, looking at it from her family's point of view, it was so narrowly presented. Now, I know that lots of people, they want to see a story and they don't want to get bogged down in historical facts, but I looked at it to try and get a few historical insights into it. Whereas, in fact, there was virtually no historical information conveyed at all. Like, for instance, to take this woman where she kind of sat in the family, there was not even a passing reference to any of this stuff that would have had to have been very significant for the woman. For instance, her grandfather was a king and he was executed by Cromwell and company. Her father was a king, he was deposed. Her sister was a queen and her brother-in-law were a king. And that would have been kind of the background in which she kind of grew up as a child and as an adult and lived as an adult. And I would have, I suppose, going to it, I would have hoped there would have been some kind of a connection drawn to all these other players, as it were, in the British monarchy. And on the politics, there wasn't, I don't think the word Ireland was mentioned once in the film. Not once. Was Scotland mentioned? I don't think so. And as Queen of Great Britain, as she became Great Britain and Northern Ireland, she had a very significant role in both countries, which was perhaps more felt after she died and when she was replaced. Like you mentioned when we were chatting earlier that you hadn't heard much about her. But one of the reasons I think you may not hear much about her is because she was a good monarch. She just got on with the job. um, and did it well, I think. In a kind of a job that's kind of a very, very, very complicated, difficult job for anybody to be doing. And the fact that you haven't heard about her, I think partly reflects that success, not a failure, but success.
And also my complete lack of historical knowledge.
Well, maybe so. But the people that we often remember are the people who are infamous for one reason or another, such as the bold Henry VIII. and to just give that comparison between the two, like, where was England as it stood when Henry VIII became king, and where was it when he left it? And he left it far worse off than when he took over. Whereas if you look at where was the kingdom or the kingdoms when she took over, when she left, and she did quite a good job, I think. And the place would have been, by and large, would have been improved anyway, and well set for what was to come. For instance, like in the war that got a passing reference, she made a kind of she seemed to give support when it was right, and then she kind of went for peace, and out of which England or Britain got in a very, very good peace treaty. So that was from an English point of view, that was a great success. And to give your listeners kind of a little connected to the present, incidentally, it's one of the reasons why you're still dealing with Gibraltar, because they picked that up as part of that treaty. Like to look at what happened when Anne died, and because she died without an heir, it was the end of the Stuart line, and that brought in the kings from Hanover into the kind of English-British setup, the Georges. And by and large, as far as I could see, one of them was worse than the other. And they would have had a kind of a pure hatred. Looking back to the Irish point of view, to the Irish Catholics, they seemed to just hate them. And they ushered in and facilitated all these penal laws that simply effectively made it a crime just to be a Catholic in your own country. There was similar upheavals in Scotland on account of these guys, including that led up to, shall we say, Culloden and the Highland clearances and all that went with that. So, by comparison with the kind of the tolerance and the judicious nature of Anne, it shows her up in a very positive way. And against the background of, God help the poor woman, I can't remember, was it 15 or 17 children she lost?
Yeah, 15. It's so sad. Yeah,
so tragic, so utterly tragic. And yet she kind of kept a cool head and a tolerant view in state affairs. So from the film point of view, I thought it did a kind of a great injustice to her, really. I thought it might have presented a kind of a rounded picture of the woman as a person, and in the wider context and the contribution that she made, etc. But I found it was virtually none of this, just this kind of soap opera going off the rails.
Okay, now you're making me feel bad, and I'm kind of leaning to your side, because what I was going to say at the end of this is, yeah, but Dad, like, yes, there's a wider historical context, but this filmmaker chose to pick just the setting of the palace and the relationship between these three women. And I still think that's the case, and the filmmaker can make the film he wants to make, and I really enjoyed it. But now I'm thinking, I just wish maybe someone else had made the movie you were talking about first, so that we saw that side of her. Because this movie kind of made out like the decisions she made were based on the fact that the young girl she fancied made references to a party, or the guy with the wig got to come in and bend her ear when the other girlfriend was out having a fight with her. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Again, I've done no research, and there could be a TV series or a movie out there about this. So hopefully someone will let us know if they do, or we'll do a bit of research.
I'd be very interested.
Because I think, like you mentioned, Henry VIII or someone like that. And there's so much about them back and forth that anyone could really make a movie now about him. And it's just adding to the chatter. But I guess you're saying, and from my point of view, she may not be that well known. So it's a shame that this is how she's being thrust into the spotlight.
Yeah.
But I still think, even though the movie was comical and it showed her with mood swings, I still think the movie didn't play her for a fool, in that she ultimately was listening to counsel. When she heard that the people were against this tax, she really took that to heart, and she was just really sad about her children, and and I actually think the movie didn't make her out to be a bad person or play her for a fool. The movie just chose to take what is admittedly a fun setting of the very claustrophobic setting of a palace, when one person's completely in control, and she can, and I'm sure stuff like this happened where she can walk by to someone and say, don't look at me, don't speak to me. And that stuff was the stuff that made me laugh out loud, because I just thought, I'd love to, on a bad day tell people they can't look at me, they can't speak to me.
Yeah,
exactly. And I really think the way they played the relationship between the two other women was very funny. The way they were competing for her affections, like, I have to say, that was making me laugh out loud and all of that stuff. So I think there's probably, I feel bad now for all the stuff you said, because it sounds like she was an amazing queen and I never even heard of her. But I think it's a different movie, the one you're talking about, really.
But I know that there clearly there was competition between these two women to have the ear of the queen. Like, that's a fact. But to have made a film out of it, and just kind of focusing in on that, and then throwing everything and anything into the pot to kind of, stir it up a bit. Like, pick as an example, I think, which is kind of, utterly ridiculous, beyond ridiculous. This brothel scene that they threw into the plot. Where she ends up locked up in a brothel for a period of time. Like, what pure and utter tripe altogether. Like, it's really third-rate stuff, this. What the hell was that doing in the film?
The brothel stuff actually was a bit weird. Even I thought that. But then I did my brief historical research afterwards, where I went on Wikipedia, and it was interesting that woman who had been her close friend or lover or whatever for a long time did end up banished and kicked out of the country. So that relationship definitely existed.
Oh yeah, but did your research show up that she spent a while locked up in a brothel?
I didn't actually. But maybe Wikipedia just hasn't gone deep enough yet.
Yeah.
Someone will update it now. You need to update it.
Yeah, but when you see something like that thrown into a film, like, which is pure nonsense, like it you'd have to question anything and everything you saw in the film in terms of what's factual and what's pure. Well, I won't get crude about it.
I know, it's a funny one, and actually I hadn't embarrassingly realised this at the time when I saw the movie, but funnily enough, I was comparing it to The Lobster in my head, and I mentioned it in the previous podcast, and turns out it is the same director as The Lobster.
Right.
Did you see that movie with Colin Farrell?
No, I didn't.
And that is one of my favourite movies. It's so funny and farcical and weird, but the difference between the two movies is they're shot similarly, they're acted similarly, they have the same actress, but that one was pure fantasy and this one wasn't. So
allegedly.
Yeah, exactly. So that one, you're not besmirching anyone, it's just funny. It's about people turning into animals, like, it's a silly movie.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is, something quite different.
Yeah. So I think, like, if it's there is room for a kind of and it'd be very interesting to see somebody did a serious piece of work about the Queen and her reign. But for a bit of light-hearted relief, maybe this film, The Favourite, it might meet that criteria, but I think that's about it, at least from my point of view. Perhaps your listeners might have very different views on this.
Yeah, well, it's doing very well. I mean, I think it was just nominated for 12 BAFTAs, so obviously it's agreeing with people, and I laughed my head off for the whole movie, which I now feel really bad about, so thanks for that. And what we'll have to do is I'm sure we'll find something somewhere in a TV series or a movie about her, and we can do a review on that at some point.
Very good.
Yeah. But thank you, Dad, for dialing in again as our historical correspondent. No doubt, as Oscar season ramps up, there'll be lots of historical movies for you to check back in on.
Oh, okay. My pleasure.
All right.
All the
Thanks,
best
Dad.
now. Bye-bye.
Bye.